Hi, kids. It's Alabama Annie with another episode of Stories and Songs for you. Today, we aren't going to hear about Bigfoot or ghosts or mysterious places in the woods. Well, sort of we are, but not in a creepy way. Today, we're going to hear about some mysterious stone walls. Now, these walls can be found all around the United States, but the wall I'm using to begin this story is not even a mile from here on the side of Lookout Mountain above a waterfall. So here we go with the story. Who built these mysterious stone walls? Above Nakalula Falls, high on the western bluff above the gorge, can be found the remains of a stone fortress, similar to those found in other locations throughout the eastern United States, and believed to have been constructed by the Welsh or perhaps the Vikings as a battlement and fortress against attackers. But that theory remains in question because of the validity of the evidence concerning Prince Madoc of Wales and its coming to America, according to record in 1172. These stone walls can be found across the Appalachians, secreted away in remote and inaccessible locations for the most part. The walls seem to have always been constructed in a west to easterly direction and also built along parallel lines that span great distances. One series of walls can be found near Fort Mountain, Georgia, and another in Kentucky, at almost the same degree in latitude as the wall above Nakalula Falls. And another is found near Mentone, Alabama, on a cliff face above another waterfall. But these are by no means the only walls in question. Similar structures span a vast area into Indiana and Ohio, and on across the Mississippi into Missouri as well. And of course, beyond the Mississippi to the west can be found many such walls. The height of these stone walls average only 5 foot. Not high enough to provide much protection, but there is speculation that many of the stones used in the wall's construction had been pilfered over time and reused for various purposes. A good example of what these walls may have looked like prior to that pilfering is the 20-foot high wall at Old Stone Fort in Tennessee. A very similar fortification can still be visited also today in Ohio, but the walls of Fort Ancient in Ohio were constructed of clay and limestone and not as many rock. There is further speculation that these walls may have been built by the Hopewells, who created a vast trade empire across the continent, reaching from the Atlantic to South America. Excavation at several of these sites has yielded little to build fact upon concerning who exactly constructed them. There is early on the discovery of a few coins of ancient origin, a little gold, mica, and bits of ancient charcoal and sand that actually originated in the Middle East. But all of these discoveries have done little more than to confuse anyone attempting to determine the origin of those builders. In early legend of the Cherokee, there are stories of bearded white men who lived in caves and stone enclosures upon their arrival to Lookout Mountain sometime around the 13th century, and of a tribe of people they called the Moon Eye, who they drove from their territory for fear that these people were bewitched. This takes the speculation of the wall builders back to the theory that these walls and enclosures were built by Europeans. While the Hopewell civilization was referred to as the Roman Empire of the New World, these builders vanished, perhaps overrun by the Mississippian tribes and the Cherokee and others. By the time early white settlers arrived at Lookout Mountain and surrounding areas, the story of who built these walls and enclosures had been told and retold and added to or detracted from, so that there was a blurred line between fact and fiction, and to this day the identity of those builders remain a mystery. One on a high bluff overlooking what is now called DeSoto Falls near Mentone, Alabama, is a series of 5 rooms with niches and connecting doorways carved out by a man. High above the river, these caves are and have always been called the Welch Caves. And many speculate the walls are the handiwork of Prince Madoc of Wales and his men. The Indians of the area were not known to excavate rock in this manner, and stone fortifications had been erected around the exterior of these caves to offer more protection from element and enemy. There is only one path leading to the caves from the top, narrow and dangerous to traverse, and no way up from the water below. Though the presence of Madoc upon Lookout Mountain was considered only a tale by historical scholars, it was General John Sevier, who would later become the governor of Tennessee, who found curious items within those stone battlements while he and his men were scouting the area for the enemy during the war, and discovered the caves. And it was then that General Sevier and 2 of his men made the dangerous walk down to the caves, thinking they might find evidence of the enemy there. But instead, they discovered the stoneworks and a treasure that would puzzle him all the days of his life. Beside the stone walls that had been constructed along the openings of the cave and stone pillars which supported the openings and the doorways, they found skeletons within this enclosure, each wearing suits of armor that were worked in bronze. Resting on these armors on flat stones that resembled tables were swords and other tools of battle. Though the moment did not afford the extensive exploration of the caves, the general vowed to return to the site as soon as he could, and after the war, he did return with some of his men and supplies and removed the skeletons and the coats of armor and treasures from their resting place with much difficulty, extracting them in individual pine boxes, which were hoisted up to the top of the precipice by rope, and when they were loaded, they were taken by wagon to Nashville. There, the relics were locked away for safekeeping. That's my dog in the background that you hear. For safekeeping in a museum, and remained there for some time. They remained there actually until the early 1900s, when sadly they mysteriously disappeared during a renovation, never to be seen again. And the only evidence that they were ever there were 6 photographs taken by the college newspaper. There was a rumor that the skeletons and armor might have found their way into the vaults of an antiques dealer back east, and though this accusation was investigated, it was never proven. Still, the caves and the stone battlements remain as proof of Madoc and his presence on Lookout Mountain. According to some accounts, the Welch were the second to explore the area. Prince Madoc of Wales, or Owen Gwynedd, and his brother, along with 19 others, sailed from Abercarrack, Gwynedd, across the ocean into Mobile Bay around 1170, moving north along the rivers in their exploration. And they eventually followed the Alabama, the Coosa, and the Warrior rivers to the north. Somewhere near what we refer to as the Sand Mountain Plateau, they encountered early Alabamians living together in villages, tending gardens, and raising livestock. Friendly and helpful, the Alabamians embraced these newcomers. They shared in the bounty of the hunt and the harvest, which the Welch, some of their women were falling in love with these bearded men and their iron tools and coracle boats, and their love-making produced dark-haired, light-skinned children who spoke 2 languages and were raised learning the art of ironworking, tool making, and boat building. Over the years, some of the Welch and their families moved on to the west and the north, procreating with other tribes, building stone huts, defensive fortifications, and stone walls along the way. Some years after the Welsh arrived, Prince Madoc returned to Wales to report what they had found on their journey after several years. Some accounts say that Madoc brought with him a Cherokee woman he had taken as a wife, and that she bore him a son and remained in Wales when he and his men returned, sailing across the ocean for Mobile Bay again. But this time the party was never heard or seen again. Some believe their ship was lost at sea, while others speculate they may have lost their lives in battle or had been taken captive by some less friendly tribe And though some scholars deny that the Welsh were ever here, Madoc and his explorations were used successfully, according to records, as evidence by Queen Elizabeth I when a dispute arose between England and Spain over territories in the Americas. So there we have it. But the stone walls remain, dotting the American countryside and still raising questions from everyone who sees them. So there is the story. And like I said, this is taken from my book about Lookout Mountain, which covers stone fortifications, caverns, legends of the mountains, such as the Little People. And I've always questioned, Rock City and the fairy village there. Makes you kind of wonder, doesn't it? So you can check that out on Kindle. It's in Stories and Tales, Volume 1. And if you're interested in more, I'm sure there's a lot of information out that you can locate about the Welsh. And actually, there was a gentleman who did research on Prince Madoc several years ago and posted an extensive volume of information. So it's always fascinated me. And in fact, I've been working on a book about him for several years, but I keep hitting walls. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. I'm sorry little Miss Bella made so much noise, but she's getting older and she likes to bump into things. So you guys have a good day, and I'll see you next time.